John or not.
Let's go down to Arizona now. Stephen Holder is hanging out at the owners' meetings and had a great conversation with Jim Irsay yesterday. But look, it was 31-1 in the vote for the replay on interference. I can only assume that everybody you've talked to think this is a good idea, right?
Well, they felt the pressure to do something. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it was very telling that the coaches, the coaches kind of drove this discussion. That generally is not the case with these things. The owners and executives tend to drive these conversations and ultimately often overrule their coaches. I remember some years ago, I don't know, maybe Kevin, you might have been at these meetings one year where they changed the overtime rule, for example, and now you've got to make decisions, right? And that just puts more on the coaches' plates. Well, the coaches were staunchly opposed to that. They went out to their golf outing, I believe, on a Tuesday afternoon, because that's what you do in Florida, right, in March. And the owners voted on it while they were on the golf course. They came out and they were like, what the hell? So this was very different, though. And this was a situation where the coaches were like, look, man, our jobs are on the line every day, man. You got to help us. So I think that push and that very heated conversation, their sessions went way long. I mean, like an hour over the scheduled time the other day. I mean, so you knew something was really going down. And it was clear there was a lot of desperation to get something done. It's not a perfect solution, I don't think. I think there will be problems along the way because oftentimes when you don't have a perfect solution, you do encounter issues that you didn't foresee, right? So we may be back here a year from now talking about other conversations that need to happen. But I do think on the whole, it was a positive to get something done as opposed to just seeing this problem and not addressing it. So I think they're trying. I'll give them credit. They're trying.
Stephen, moved over to the Colts talk. You have a great piece up on The Athletic right now about Jim Irsay, like he always does, seemingly expanding on, any topic that you ask him, but certainly a Peyton Manning topic. Kind of the Cliff Notes version, basically, do I have this right? In 2016, late in that 2016 season, this is when the conversation happened of Jim Irsay possibly throwing the idea out to Peyton Manning of, hey, if you want to come in here and run the show, come in here and run the show.
Yeah, and we all know that at that point, Jim was thinking about what the next steps were, right? I mean, at that point, I think, certainly Pagano was under the gun, Ryan Grigson was under the gun, Ryan ended up getting fired, I guess, the following January. So clearly, there were already thoughts in Jim's mind at that point that, look, we got to turn the page here. So before you make any big decision like that, you have to know who's available. I think is always the key. It's like it's easy to fire people. It's not as easy to line up the replacements. So he did the right thing. I mean, Jim's been doing this a long time, and Jim Irsay decided, well, I need to know what's out there. And of course, why wouldn't you want to know what Peyton Manning's plans were? So look, they're close, and it's, at the end of the day, they may have had their issues initially, but I think they have really, really bridged that in the last few years. And I mean, certainly, building a statue helps. And they really do, I think, have very close heart-to-heart conversations, and this was one. And he brings Peyton into his inner sanctum back there, where he's got his little luxury suite at the team facility, and it ended up being a series of conversations, really, as opposed to just that one day. It was an ongoing conversation for a while, and Peyton really, really struggled with this. And I give Jim Irsay a lot of credit because he didn't try to convince him to do it. It was like, no, you have to be all in. And Peyton can't half-ass something, right? I mean, he just doesn't know how to do that. So I think both men were pretty smart in realizing that, this has got to be the perfect situation. Everybody's got to be on the same page. And ultimately, Peyton decided that wasn't the case. What I'd say now is it doesn't appear it's an ongoing conversation. So that, I'm not saying the ship has sailed like forever, but certainly they're not currently talking about this anymore. I think in the short term, if Peyton Manning wants to pursue such an opportunity, it's going to have to be somewhere else. And I think that opportunity might be there. I mean, certainly he would be attractive for a lot of teams, right? But it's a really interesting conversation, and it, I think, shed some light on maybe some of what was going on. But look, Chris Ballard's in charge, and I got that's the other takeaway from this conversation with Jim Irsay was that Chris Ballard is running the show. He's got the keys, and Jim Irsay is absolutely deferential to Chris Ballard. And so that's one of the stories I'm working on now. Just, the extent of Chris Ballard's authority. He has full authority. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Irsay called him the best GM candidate of the 21st century for a reason. Yeah. And you mentioned the half-ass of Peyton Manning. You can't see him at that time doing it. I also can't see Peyton wanting to come into this building where you already have Ballard establishing this full-on rebuild. I think Peyton wants to be the head cook in the kitchen. And whether that includes some ownership stake somewhere else, maybe that is part of his grand plan. But I just can't see him playing, potentially second fiddle to a guy like Ballard.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and I think the proof of that is in Irsay's quote where he says, "I think what Peyton really wants is to come in and get his own coach and build something." And that's not this situation. No. This situation is well on its way now, right? And so if you know Peyton, I think it sounds, at least, is based on this, and it probably lines up with Peyton's personality. He wants to come in and say, all right, this is what we're doing. We're doing this, and this, as opposed to taking the baton and finishing someone else's job. Like, that's a different calculation and a different situation. That is not what Jim Irsay described. Jim Irsay described the conversations with Peyton Manning as being something where he would come in and he would shape an organization in the image he wants. And that is not the case here now. It was, and it would have been in 2016 or 17. But certainly now things have changed dramatically. And so, yeah, it just doesn't work. It doesn't make a lot of sense for either party, I don't believe. So, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the other question has been, is Peyton interested in ownership? My takeaway from Jim Irsay is it ain't happening here. Okay, he's not getting a piece of the Colts because I thought Jim Irsay was very clear in saying, hey, maybe you find a really generous owner and, he wants to back you and you can kind of get a piece of that. But it was like, don't look at me. That was the takeaway. It's like, so that's not going to happen here either, from my estimation.
Yeah. Beyond Peyton, though, the thing I took out of that article more than anything was Chris Ballard really wants to reach back into the past and make these guys a real foundational part of what they're doing, as you described in the article. So these guys can stand on the shoulders of that fantastic Colts era. I think that's a pretty big deal, Stephen.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, I can tell you, as a kid growing up in South Florida, right? I mean, so I've told this story before. I thought the Marino Dolphins were going to win 9 Super Bowls. And stupid me. But my point is, you always had. Look, the Dolphins haven't been good in 30 years, right? But you always had that Super Bowl era that will never be matched, an undefeated team and all that. And that was something the organization to this day can hang its hat on and just say all right, scoreboard. You know what I mean? These are our guys, and they're all in the Hall of Fame, and that's what we're about, right? So the Colts have that. They literally have that. And I think it's really smart of Chris Ballard to reach back to that and embrace those guys, and I thought the Jeff Saturday revelation was very interesting. Wanting Jeff Saturday or considering Jeff Saturday as part of the coaching staff, and a lot like Peyton, Jeff has young kids and is kind of doing some other things and just wasn't ready for that full commitment yet. But they really have a lot of value in their former players, and they weren't just players. These guys are smart guys that have a lot to offer, and the Colts realize that. And so kudos to Chris Ballard for embracing that and bringing those guys back in. And Kevin, you've been around. We've noticed that. I feel like in the last year and a half to 2 years, I've seen a lot more of those guys, be it at training camp or otherwise. I think that's going to continue.
Yeah, I think back to the Ballard quote after the season ended about, building from your core and your own, and referencing watching the Ring of Honor ceremony, I guess whoever went into the Ring of Honor this year, maybe it was Reggie or something.
Yeah,
and looking down on the field and seeing all of those guys, and they were drafted by Polian and grew, through your own organization. That's obviously the goal that Ballard is trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think he's really trying to emulate it. There's no question. I mean, it's really not. You don't have to look far for an example of how to do it, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It's like, well, just do what they did in the previous era.
Easier said than done.
Just draft nine Hall of Famers, and you're going to be great.
And find that Robert Mathis in round 5 while you're at it.
Yeah, I mean, like, how hard is that? So, but in all seriousness, right? I mean, like, that's what you're shooting for. I mean, that team was absolutely 100% homegrown, and there is no question. I think you see Bill Polian's influence on Chris Ballard too, and I think we both know that Bill Polian has really I think played a big role in behind the scenes role in just sort of advising both Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay and Bill Polian have also kind of bridged their differences, right? And they now, I think, are in constant contact. And as Chris Ballard said yesterday, he's like, "Oh, I'm definitely tapping into Bill Polian. Why wouldn't I? The guy's in the Hall of Fame." So they have tremendous resources in the people associated with the franchise, and they're doing the right thing by tapping into that.
Stephen, was when Jim Irsay was referencing paying top dollar possibly for an inside linebacker, it sounded like during free agency.
Yeah.
Was that a C.J. Mosley name drop?
I don't know. I wonder. I should have probably circled back, but you can't get a word in. Jim never stops talking. That's a
been there
problem. If you've seen the Jim Irsay interview, you know what I'm talking about. So it's not even an inside joke. The point is, there were 2 positions he mentioned by name, and Jim is extremely smart. I know he sounds like he's rambling, but everything he says is very purposeful and has significance. I've learned that about Jim Irsay in my 6 years with him. And the one thing I did observe is he mentioned inside linebacker and he mentioned safety. There's no question he's talking about Landon Collins. I have no doubt. And that I know just from my reporting. And I did wonder, is it C.J. Mosley? Is it someone else? There was a little bit of a rumbling about a couple linebackers, I thought. I just never got it confirmed myself. But it's interesting. But I will say I'm working on a story now just about how Jim Irsay talked about how he told Chris Ballard, because he said Chris Ballard would keep calling him saying, "Hey, here's the latest, here's what we're doing, here's where the money's at," in his conversations with these free agents. And Jim would be like, "Dude, just do it." and he said he'd still be like, "Nah, it got too expensive. I couldn't do it, Jim." And it's remarkable. I mean, you have Jim Irsay literally sitting here telling him, "Give him whatever he wants." And Chris Ballard saying, "Nope, not going to do it."
Slightly different than the previous GM.
Yeah. I mean, and Jim was like, "All right, whatever you say, man." It's really, truly remarkable stories. I mean, it's a little more detailed than that, but that was basically what happened. And we didn't name the free agent. I thought it might have been Collins, just reading between the lines, but he gave us the backstory on how it played out, and that's exactly what happened. He told Chris Ballard, he's like, "All right, sounds good." He said, "Get him in here." And Chris called him back and said, "No, we're out."
Yeah.
Like, what? So, hey, man, give him credit,
He's got a plan. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us. Great article on The Athletic. You can go over there and check that out. And if you don't have a subscription to The Athletic and you want great sports writing, it's just mandatory. It really is. It's just mandatory.
I appreciate it, guys.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye-bye. No, I mean, you think about the people that are just great writers around here that are part of The Athletic now and the stuff that they do and what they're allowed to do. And it's just fantastic stuff, and I'll keep paying for it as long as they keep pushing it out there. I don't pay for a lot, but I'll pay for that.
No, I could not agree more. And here locally with Steven and Bob Kravitz, Scott Agnes, even Pete Sampson, the Notre Dame writer, all 4 of those guys do a tremendous job.
You got to help me out too. I'm
and Dustin. I should mention Dustin DePiric as well. Does great work for college basketball.
The other day. Sure. Mm-hmm. So you got to help me out though too. And I'll talk about this along with some Tyler Trent news in a second. But I got a question for you because I am at my limit with one particular part of my life.
Oh boy.
And I actually need your advice.
I'm nervous. I don't know if I can offer a lot of life help.
I think you can in this case.
Okay.
We'll do it next on FM 107.5 and 1070 The Fan.